Good evening. Welcome.
Hey there.
Welcome to the After Hour Show. Joe in Norway. I'm with Ann Lee, retired college professor and community member at the Daily Coast. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Hey there, Ann.
Hey, how's it going? What's for supper tonight?
We got leftover or scraps, just what I had lying around. Nothing formal, but I've been meaning to make this for weeks now, but I haven't been able to time it. My walk burner is out at the farm, and wanted to do some. So Bruce was asking for some Asian style noodle dish, so I thought I might whip something up, little street vendor style, hawker center style. But we're going to be on electric tonight, so it's going to be a little difficult with my round walk on a flat induction top. Haven't gotten one of the old induction yet.
Well, do rings work on? Does a ring holder work on an induction top?
No, because there's no heat. When there's no contact, there's no heat.
Right.
But they do make concave induction walk burners now. I haven't tried them, but a lot of restaurants will be using those. If they can't have gas, they use those, or if it's a small place, it's just more efficient. The only thing you're missing there is the wok height from the burn. But Bruce isn't in the house. This is what I'm gonna do is just whip up something that you can have with leftovers lying around in your kitchen, hopefully, or some things, whatever. Like rice noodles, which are super simple. You just soak them in boiling water, and they're half finished. So I've got some leftover ones from earlier. Got about a single portion, a little more maybe. Piece of tofu, a little leftover tofu. A few snap peas here. They're just in season. And a scallion. I had my last half rotten pepper, so I'll use what's left that's decent. Some bean sprouts, some shiitake mushrooms, which I used to make this. Like we keep it all vegetarian here on the After Hours show. This is a vegetarian quote unquote fish sauce, I guess. More like a savory mushroom sauce. Seaweed, dulse, shiitake, little miso, give a boost of umami from the shiitakes. So these are leftover. I'll slice those up. So I'll saute the tofu and the vegetables first. Oh, I'm missing one other thing. Where'd it go? Oh no, red onion. I'm gonna use red onion. And some red onions. I guess I'll use this instead. We'll saute the vegetables real quick. I've got basically what you do. You don't really need any recipe. You just take whatever condiments you have in your house. Like for example, I really like this Chinese pickled red chili sauce. And this is a different type of fermented chili paste. And then we season with a little soy sauce, the fish sauce, got some black vinegar or acid. Could maybe use kick up mayonnaise if you want to make it more sweet. This is like a soy molasses sauce. Have dark soy sauce, for example, can use that. And there's a vegetarian mushroom sauce if you don't make it yourself, which I probably should do one of these days, considering that these are mostly just sugar.
Yeah.
But,
Indeed.
Yeah, the vegetarian mushroom sauce is just, or it's vegetarian version of the oyster sauce that's traditionally used in Chinese cooking. I mean, you could even go you do some kimchi seasoning. I don't know. This was on sale at the shop. I don't know if we'll try that. I don't know. Maybe.
Hey.
So we slowly add, as we saute things, we add a little ingredient here and there to build up the flavors, and then we finish it off with some crunchy bits. Got some fried onions, and don't have any peanuts, but I've got some pretty pistachio. I thought those would be nice. So I thought maybe I'll get started on the prep and let you commence, and then it'll probably just take me 5 minutes to cook it all.
Yeah, probably 15 minutes, something like that. Okie doke. Been a tough week for lots of people, and we got to the end of the week. There was a holiday because Donald Trump himself had asked for this day off to attend his son's graduation in, I guess, in Florida. It's a school called Oxbridge, I think, Academy. And so here you can see the Trump deciding to act like an idiot parent. He's trying to do, he does shtick. And one of his little pieces of shtick here, embarrassing Melania to the left there in the hat and her father to her right. I'm curious why the grandmother, that is, Melania's mom, the Melania's mom and pop essentially raised Barron, particularly in these last years. So he'd been really raised quite separately rather than living in the White House. Although I assume he has a room or something. So there's that. In other matters, I'll be talking in a little bit about Ukraine. Ukraine has gotten a little tough this week as well for a variety of strange reasons. They've raised the trope again that the reason why the Ukrainians are having trouble is because of an American restriction on using American weapons over the border in Russia. This is what the current state of affairs looks like. And so what I'm going to talk about a little bit is there's an incursion from the north here in two areas. Well, here actually in above Kharkiv, across from Belgorod, and right here it is. You can see that. And then there's numerous other little skirmishes across the line. Robotine seems to have been given up. It's a very small little area left over from the last offensive. But in the midst of all this, there has been the usual drone attacks, a lengthy drone attack into Russia from the last week, using another one of those weird little kind of sort of Cessna or Piper Cup kind of drones, which it's essentially a small airplane that has been fitted with a remote control, and I think it has a AI controller on it that allows it to fly without requiring, without giving off any kind of signals. In other words, it's hard to track. Also because it flies at moderately low altitude. But as I've mentioned before, the new records are over 1,000 kilometers into Russian airspace, which also provide an interesting means by which they can score propaganda points. It would, I assume, be amusing to drop a drone on top of Putin's mansion outside of Sochi, which would be quite amusing. But I assume they're leaving that for the appropriate moment. There was an overturning of the national government in terms of cabinet members, kicking some people upstairs, other people laterally. The new defense secretary is a guy who's trained as an economist, and it is more about the wartime Russian economy. So there's that. One of the issues that has come up this last week is because of this little assault on Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, and fairly close, about 30 kilometers from the border with Russia, and the sort of a parallel city on the other side is Volgograd, which has been the target of numerous attacks by the Ukrainians on Russia. But these little areas are problematic simply because they're trying to create, as I think some have assumed, that there's a kind of buffer area of several kilometers that they're trying to establish. The Russians are trying to establish, and undoubtedly used for negotiation, among other things. Creating such a buffer allows them to move their artillery closer, and hence the argument about using American equipment to hit things on the other side of the border. And actually, the Ukrainians have been quite scrupulous about using only Ukrainian-developed weapons in Russia. I mean, there's nothing that would suggest an American was even involved in any of the drones or whatever that have been used on Russian targets, largely refineries, oil refineries or tank farms on the other side. And they hit a goodly number. And the Russians have not been very good about defending these sites. I mean, they're not that difficult to defend on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to keep people sort of alert all the time, because the Ukrainians certainly don't telegraph what they're going to do. So that was that week. The usual American blather has sort of subsided after the $60 billion was allocated, 60 plus billion dollars allocated to the Ukrainians. So weapons transfers are occurring. There's a notice that says that F-16s may be available by the end of the month, which will be available in time. And assuming they use the same kind of glide bomb ordnance that the Russians are using in the Kharkiv sector, we're probably going to see a lot more air attacks from both sides. The Russian, glide bomb is a standard dumb bomb with a smart sort of glider assembly added to the end of it. So you launch it from a number of 10 or 20 kilometers away, and depending on how you launch it, the bomb glides, this smart assembly attached to the dumb bomb guides it to the target. And it is relatively smart, but as I've probably mentioned before, and as I think you're probably aware, there's a tremendous amount of jamming technology at work on both sides. The usual attacks on both sides have occurred all along the 600 plus kilometer battle line. nothing major has occurred other than the usual division of attacks, where the Russians tend to attack civilian targets, and the Ukrainians stick to military targets. The troop situation has increased. The claimed there probably are 50,000 additional Russian troops on the Russian side in this northeastern sector, and the Ukrainians have sort of correspondingly moved troops up into that direction. But there's a lot of moving around. There's more maneuver than you think in this whole business here. Needless to say, the Ukrainians keep much of it quite secret, so you really don't know what certain things are going on. And then there's diversions of a variety of sorts. A couple of recent attacks on Crimean airfields, so probably, and just to compensate for the Ukrainians losing several, Russian period fighters that they used. They attacked and destroyed anti-air radar facilities and a couple of Russian fighters in Crimea. So that's kind of where we are at the present moment in terms of discussions. There is the usual, demands, the sort of blather since May Day. The May Day celebrations, where the Russians couldn't even cough up examples of their T-14 tank, which is their most advanced tank. It doesn't have people in the turret, for example. They didn't want to show any of those. The last time I think they broke down, so that's kind of where they are with that piece of technology. For the most part, it's they've been losing a lot of, the Russians have been losing a lot of men. They're almost up to 500,000 casualties. And as I said, it's something like 150,000 troops killed in action. The continuing hijacking of people. There's been some recent details on and this is at the policy think tank level. The discussions are that the Chinese and the Russians are losing population, so hence there is some suggestion that the potential for conflict, military conflict between everybody and the Russians or the Chinese is sort of ramping up. This is you need to have to decide which kind of school of which theories you like to play on, because certainly the Russians are playing on it. I mean, the argument that the Russians have used that, well, the Ukrainians were planning on attacking Russia, and it seemed like NATO was agitating to do it, so we attacked first. And preemptive attacks have been, it's not de rigueur, and I think certainly public opinion is still on the side of the Ukrainians in that context. Similarly, I think it's just simply as it were, the theoretical hegemony of certain theories about how global warfare occurs. Some people are assuming that there's more conflict between China and everybody else in the Indo-Pacific, and that's not really quite true. And ignored in all this, as I've mentioned before, is the fact that there was actually a very good meeting about a month ago between Xi Jinping and the head of Taiwan. It was actually a very good. There was no rancor or anything. It was a good state visit. Unfortunately, the global media have paid more attention to Putin's visit to China and sort of ignored the fact that there's really not that much friction. I mean, there is friction at the ocean level with. But when you see the kind of the layout of the South China Sea, it's pretty easy to have conflicts with everybody in the damn place. The current one being, of course, China and the Philippines squirting each other with fire hoses or hoses and stuff when their ships get too close to each other or come too close to the islands that have been converted by the Chinese. Have been sort of a whole bunch of islands in the South China Sea are claimed by multiple sides. Some are occupied by one country or another. And it's not just one or the other, it is multiple differences. The Japanese, the Vietnamese, the Chinese, and then there's some little islands that Taiwan makes contestable. So there are multiple claims. They have varieties of historical claims, which are kind of wacky. Some of them, well, the map was done in the 16th century, so therefore this one is the accurate one. It's very similar to Putin claiming that Ukraine doesn't exist because it doesn't exist on the 17th century map, whereas Russia doesn't exist on some maps, depending on the time you've chosen. So, Joe,
where did that meeting take place? In China or Thailand?
Yeah, so it was in China. I don't recall whether it was in Beijing. It might not have been in Beijing, but it was a major visit. It had the same amount of Asian press coverage, but clearly the U.S. never mentions it. Never mentioned that visit, which is really annoying in some ways because essentially it's the same type of state visit.
Doesn't serve the narrative.
Doesn't serve the narrative. That is the need to arm Taiwan and blah blah blah. As I've said before, I think it's a long game. It's the thing about having a joint meeting between Taiwan and the People's Republic is that they're essentially speaking the same, nearly identical language. So it's not like you don't have all the kind of hitches in the kind of connection between the two. And then if you look back at the old the agreements that which soften the relations, that is, you could travel between the places, and when you get the rules regarding the island Kinmen, which is I think the former Quemoy of Quemoy and Matsu, that there was a crisis on that in the 1950s and 60s. The darn thing is only a couple of kilometers across from China. The island's really close. And so if you're a local, that is, if you live on Kinmen, you can actually go directly on the ferry to China without a lot of hoopla. And but if you're from anywhere else, not from the island, you can't get into China via that way. So in other words, you still got to go through Shanghai or whatever, Beijing or whatever. So it's kind of an interesting situation because it's so darn close. And obviously, you're pretty much going to lose that island in the first 3 minutes of any Taiwan-China military interchange. So it's not like it's a little island bristling with. It's not like Guantanamo. Or it is like Guantanamo in the sense that it goes to China in probably 10 seconds. So aside from that little sidelight there, I'm working on a little thing that I want to mention, the history of, what originally was Quemoy and Matsu. Among the many island struggles of the South China Sea, that it's an amusing history, problematic, and a really interesting place for research in a variety of reasons. Okay, enough of China, and now back to Ukraine, Russia. In the context of Ukraine, Russia, there have been air attacks every day. There are continuing attacks on the energy infrastructure, and additionally, of course, the Ukrainian drones, sort of attacking things. There's been a couple of small events of whatever the internal resistance is in Russia, sabotage on small kind of rail line problems, where they, a relay station gets caught on fire or something. Nothing major though, no major explosions or whatever. But parallel to all of this, and sort of mentioned as an aside, but it actually is fairly major. There is a similar kind of revolt going on in Georgia, not the American Georgia, but Georgia, the country, and it has, pro-Russian, anti-Russian stuff going on, and there have been demonstrations. A couple of people have gotten killed. There's, the usual repression, and it's interesting. It's not on the scale of 2014 in Ukraine, but it has those elements, and of course Georgia and its relationship to the EU, and all all of those things are shifting around. And parallel to this was a report that there's, Russian agitation in Moldova, because it is, it has a weak government, not a lot of military, but I would assume that the Romanians have sort of propped that up a little bit, and NATO has, not that it has a presence there, but I think there's actually a fair amount of activity going on that nobody talks about. Note that the Transnistria, or whatever it is, there's a little sliver of land is almost Russian controlled or Russian dominated, that is between Moldova and Ukraine. If the Russians can sort of overthrow Moldova and seize it one way or the other, they'll be able to isolate the little southern portion of Ukraine that is on the sort of Moldovan side. There's a major river that goes through there, and sort of continue their little effort to try and seize all of southern Ukraine all the way up through Moldova to create their Nouveau Russia, which is the Putin plan. The issue, of course, is can they really do it, and will Putin actually survive? All of the other machinations that are going on, and then there are parallel incidents. The Baltic states have become a little bit more agitated, as it were, about all of these issues, contributing a fair amount. I can't remember if it's Estonia or Latvia that contributes a significant number of a significant portion of its military budget. It's fairly small, but it's still a lot of proportion to Ukraine, because they see this all as a piece that if the Russians are going to take stuff, they're going to take the Baltic states and then try and nab Poland. And of course, there's Belarus there, which is also part of the problem. So it is still very, very, very difficult when you think of what is going on in Europe. Needless to say, there's still Russian influence in the United States Congress, and it approaches the inane, because of the little trope that was there for many years, that Americans couldn't find Ukraine on a map, which is sort of a little thing that they've bought from the right wing former.
And almost forgot. Sorry. Phew.
Hit it.
Focusing too much on what you were saying, I forgot the MSG. There we go. Just a little touch.
Umami, no umami, umami free.
White powder of umami, white sugar of umami.
They don't do that in Chinese restaurants very much anymore. It's give you a little a little saucer.
I think it's
MSG. Some do, but it's very rare.
Europe hasn't quite hit Europe. In the big cities, it has. Not as much of an issue as it is in the States.
I recall it as being a major condiment in that context. Europe remains screwy in terms of whether NATO is going to put trainers or troops on the ground in Ukraine. Macron suggested that they might do that with French troops, and I think it was just a trial balloon that has been sort of mashed around, I think, by NATO. I think there will be increases in the number of people training Ukrainians, just simply because there's more hardware going in. There's been more contributions of radar systems. The Germans are moving a fairly large radar array and donating one. Both the Germans and the Danish, I think, have been sort of slowly moving one or two, and one or two means it's actually a set of 5 or 6 pieces of equipment that accounts for about $1 billion of Patriot missile systems into Ukraine. The issue, of course, you need to protect the capital, Kyiv, but I think other assets do need to be covered by, and the range is pretty good, so you can have them fairly widely dispersed, considering the way in which they operate. So, and of course, all of Ukraine is covered by an incredible amount of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance electronics. It's very busy, and while the airplanes that provide some of this coverage never go into Ukraine airspace. They're all there every night. You can just see the little pattern of all these things either over the Black Sea or over essentially central Europe up to Belarus. So that's kind of what's going on. And now, finally, to
Oh,
go.
yep, we're losing you, or you losing me?
No, I'm just drooling. Not. I'm hungry now. I'm even order up some takeout after I'm done.
Midnight noodles.
Yum. A lot to be said for rice noodles. Wish that it were more prominent in our grocery store, in American grocery stores. I mean, you can get it, but you only get 1 or 2 brands, and if you go to an Asian store, you have like 50 brands.
And fresh ones as well.
Yeah, indeed. In the refrigerator case, which it's always such a weird contrast if you don't live too close to your Asian food store, or you don't want to go to the local Asian store that kind of prices this stuff like a convenience store. So anyway, the other
gourmet prices.
other thing that yeah, gourmet prices. It's just so stupid. What else has happened today is the end of another week of crazy Trump trials. There was a little weakness shown in terms of the defense attempting in their cross-examination to weaken or to attack the veracity or credibility of Michael Cohen, where they sort of caught him in a couple of lies, simply because, I mean, I ask you whether you can remember something that happened, 8 or 9 years ago on the phone. How many phone calls, how much can you remember of phone calls you made a while back? And I think you need to answer that counter question. As the experts seem to say on redirect, the prosecution should be able to clean up some of those things with questions. It's pretty standard procedure. We'll clean that up on Monday, and so the trial will move on. But some people have predicted that by Thursday we actually have a result, a verdict. I think that's a little too optimistic, considering Trump's own nervousness about these kinds of activities. Not been a lot of comment about. I mean, there have been the usual, trying to interpret from court artist drawings. What Trump is doing. They have claimed in general that a majority of the time he spends sitting down, he's there with his eyes closed. Not that he's necessarily sleeping, but he definitely is trying to shut out certain inputs. He doesn't want to be caught staring or lest to get angry at Michael Cohen, etc. So that's kind of it's a fairly standard thing. The defense is trying to prove that, that there's reasonable doubt. But I think there's just too many documents, and the story is fairly solid. I just don't think it's going to, that they could, we could get a conviction, which would be interesting. And the penalties would be also interesting, a range of possibilities there. The outside chance that Trump would actually testify is still open. It's still there. So Trump could actually be incredibly stupid. And I mean, almost everybody says, no, he's not going to do it, because it's just opening up a monstrous can of worms. But you know how Trump is. And speaking of Trump, he went to his son's graduation. As I showed earlier, I tried to act like a stupid dad, which was interesting, if nothing else, because he does shtick. And Trump is at a fundraising dinner that is not quite as expensive as the one in Mar-a-Lago. I think it's the high-end plate is only $100,000. It's in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I did put up a little thing at Coase on something done by Steve Bannon, who does a little podcast, a little right-wing podcast today. And I think he was talking to the pillow guy, Michael Liddell, and they were complaining about that for some reason the new Minnesota state flag, which was selected last year, is somehow connected to a Palestinian flag. It is a stretch because they took only one of the 2,500 entries, which isn't identical to the Palestinian flag. It just has 3 stripes and has this triangular thing on it. And, you could say, well, I guess that, if you were colorblind, maybe, it's absurd because a significant number from a structural point of view have exactly the same layout. Flags in the globe have very, very similar layouts. There are a couple of American state flags that have a similar layout. But needless to say, that was they're trying to create something out of nothing, and they're just talking about all Islamophobic stuff came out, and of course, you can spin that because Keith Ellison is the Attorney General of Minnesota. He's Muslim, and then of course Ilhan Omar, who's the whipping person of all Islamophobia in the United States Congress. So you got all that going on.
They seem to be kind of like alchemists in that way. They spin this shit into gold, media gold for them, and it seems to work.
You could do it. You people out there. This is Mike Lindell.
Oh
no, this is not. No, this is Lindell. I was talking. Yes, I was talking today. Man. I was talking today to I was at I was in the war room. We were planning, and we got the reality is we got terrorists. We got terrorists taking over middle of the American states. We got terrorists in the government. Ilhan Omar, she shouldn't even be in this country. They should send her, back to the Middle East where she belongs. And the country, it's going to hell. It's just all going to hell. But when Trump gets back in, you all there on the left, you're going to be so sorry. You're going to be so sorry. You're going to need one of my pillows to cry in. You're going to need 100 of them to cry in because you're all going to be crying liberal tears. And you just wait.
More of your pillows at all of the concentration camps. That there's a big business there.
That's right. I'm gonna have a big. Yeah, we were talking about. I was talking about that with Trump. You build these camps. I can supply the pillows. I can supply the blankets. If you're gonna actually even give them blankets, I don't know if they deserve it, but I'll say they deserve a pillow or two. Okay, But yeah, the change is coming. You all just wait. The change is coming.
Indeed.
I almost for a second there thought that you were going to say that the Minnesota flag was somehow
well, just look at it.
Trans agenda or something like that.
No, it's clearly it's right there. You can see it in front of your face. It's the Palestinian flag. Okay, maybe it's not the same color, and all right, but if you squint, if you kind of look out of one eye, oh, that's it. It's definitely, come on.
Yeah, that's well, it's iconoclasty, whatever. It is the problem, and I was betting whether or not Trump was going to mention this because it's there. I mean, the spin potential is there more so than in some other states. Unlike Dearborn in Michigan, where you do have a significant Muslim population, it's not that there is a Muslim population for all the kind of conventional historical reasons, Somalia, et cetera, in Minneapolis, but at the Hmong, et cetera, speaking of, war refugees, but it's not the same kind of proportions that you see in Michigan. But I think Trump has this delusion that he's going to get back Minnesota in terms of the swing states. And I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see, particularly since this little, it's a little sop to Tom Emmer, who was almost the Speaker of the House, or maybe he was, and then they kicked him out, whatever. So it's still more about fundraising. And so that's what's going to happen tonight. And the initial report was that, well, he had prioritized the fundraising over going to Barron's graduation. Probably not. I'm sure there was a scheduler who said, "Oh, well, yeah, it's going to be in the morning, and then we can fly to Minnesota and blah blah blah." So that's what's happening soon, in an hour or two or so. We'll know more. So that should be exciting, one way or the other. And then I did in my little thing extend my little riffs on Minnesota, the mosquito being the state bird. Fargo being, despite the fact that Fargo is not in Minnesota, it is it is a twin city that is Fargo Moorhead. I've actually been to Fargo, but Fargo, the TV series and the movie, actually capture
Fargo's the state movie. That's our
state
state movie.
Yeah, indeed. Oofta. You betcha. It's just an interesting place. Speaking of Constitution Day, this doesn't look like a Constitution Day meal, Joe.
It is quite far from the tradition. I had a traditional Middle Eastern breakfast today, even though it's Norway's Constitution Day today. Lots of flag waving, lots of nationalism. I think I much prefer the Minnesota flag. It seems like they're soft pedaling nationalism with that one, with the pastels.
Well, they had to eliminate a seal that had Native Americans in it and a bunch of other crazy images that some state flags have just not been modernized, and the modernization always is amusing, because the Florida flag, I get into arguments with people, but the fact that it has a cross, a diagonal crosses on it in red, is sort of a sop to the Confederate battle flag. Similarly, the Georgia flag got redone, and the South Carolina flag got redone. So they took out many of the battle flags that were put in during Jim Crow. That they weren't in the original state flags. This Confederate battle flag business has been the result of Jim Crow.
Yeah, so similar to the sculpture, building the sculptures to.
Oh yes, and in the usual reactionary way, they've reinstated some high school names or school names, K-12 names of schools in Virginia. After they got, they eliminated the Confederate names, they brought them back because of it's politics, whatever. So that's frightening on the one hand. And of course, southern states have declared Confederate Heritage Days. I think what is it, Alabama or Mississippi? So they're it's still around. Heritage is still there, whatever that means. So I'm curious whether Trump will make some comment about it, that simply because he needs to have more shtick. His material is just so woefully idiotic. But I assume that we'll get outtakes of one kind or another.
The courtroom is exhausting him, I gather.
Well, he seemed to be really out of it yesterday during the last session, and the commentary was, and it did seem like the Todd, the primary lawyer for Trump, was stretching out his material. There really wasn't much to go on, but he kept on trying to attack Cohen on Michael Cohen on the issue of being a liar. He was Trump's lawyer for almost 10 years. I mean, of course he's a liar. God, who else could be, Trump's fixer in terms of his more sleazy side of his personality? I mean, you had to do a lot of that stuff. So it just seems, and I think with respect, I think the jury is smart enough to sort of work through that. The issue is ultimately whether there's going to be a holdout of one kind or another on the jury to hang the jury. And so, essentially we don't get what we wanted. That is a sort of definitive conviction. And it could be the only shot for the before the election to get Trump, even close to jail.
I think it will be the only shot.
Yeah, I think that's so. It's the system just allows this terrible stuff to happen, particularly if you don't have money, or if you have money.
Well,
suppose we could kick into the week that was and the week ahead.
Okay.
The autonomouscollective.net/latest gives our weekly schedule. Pretty much have this and that information all through every day, as Ann said earlier, 5 p.m. Eastern. On Monday, we have the reading and writing workshop, as well as game time. And every once in a while, we have a fun and loathing with ChatGPT, where we're discussing all the goings on in the LLM AI, generative AI world. We have Tuesday after this and that, we have the Red Hour, where we discuss short stories. Wednesday, more this and that. It's quite open for anybody. Spiritual follow this and that with spirituality and activism with Texas Tom. On Thursdays, we've got, in addition to this and that, this week we were supposed to have food prep with me, but I bailed out on that. Did it this morning. Bring the news section where we discuss articles. Texas Tom has a night owl roost for a drawing class. On Fridays, here we are. We've got the this and that at 5, we open, little break, and then we do the after hours show, followed by the Twilight Zone. John, you want to discuss a little bit about the Twilight Zone? Might have covered it earlier.
Yes, well, excuse me. Tonight, a rather garrulous man is gifted a stopwatch that has supernatural power, shall we say. And all sorts of stuff ensues after that. I don't want to give it away, so it's fun.
A woo pack Twilight Zone?
Woo pack.
Woo?
Oh, I see.
Supernatural.
Yeah. A little bit. Let's just say that it's a stopwatch that has an extraordinary side benefit besides measuring time.
Indeed. Go.
Saturday afternoon, we have a freeform leaderless reading and writing and whatever workshop. It's up to what everybody feels like doing. Followed by this and that at 3 p.m. Every third Saturday of the month, we have Valley Vox Theater, which shows a film or two and a discussion. And that's followed by Bring the Music, where we play different videos of music. And then there's Sunday, more art with Texas Tom, Hammer and Sickle Gardening Hour, the Weekly Marks Reading Group. And this Sunday, Anna is doing a segment to catch us back up on what the hell is going on in Hungary and in Slovakia.
Indeed. Big events this week there. And then the Colombo Watch Party at 5 o'clock on Sunday. John, have you chosen what you're going to talk about?
Oh yes. Yeah, so this week, William Shatner is back on Colombo.
I hope with a lot less incendiary language.
What's his hair status in this one, John?
It is a full head of somebody's hair.
Somebody, it is.
I don't think it's his yet.
Is that yet to be determined? Okay, right, we'll find out.
Yeah, John's devoting a whole...
We can do a poll while we're watching. Real or non-real?
Right. Actually, we watched last week The Intruder, where he played a racist guy trying to stir up trouble in the southern towns during school integration. And on Columbo, he plays a Rush Limbaugh-like character, radio talk
boy.
show host. Yes.
Over to you, humans.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
So
See how he does. We'll see
And
if
then
he can
Sunday-
really imitate me.
Columbo,
Lane closes out Sunday with the Sunday Soul Social. Got anything planned yet, Lane?
The final episode of Fork Britannia, we watched 2 last week, was very much tied into the working class movement. And I'll I don't know. I'm gonna show the final episode and a gig of sorts, but I don't know who it's gonna be yet. I'm plowing through the artists involved. But it'll be fun and soulful. And soulful.
Right on.
excellent. Well, I guess we better wind this up. We promise to do better next week. Try and stay alive. We'll see you next week. Happy
Take care,
Constitution Day.
everyone.
Wow.